Welcome to the CCFR Radio Podcast, your source for news, updates, and stories from the CCFR.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 134 of the CCFR Radio Podcast. I'm your host, Rod Yeltaka. Thanks for joining me again. Hopefully you're all rested from the holidays. My intention was to not deal with politics at all over the break. I don't know how successful I was, but I did get some rest. Hopefully you did the same. I was actually chatting with Tracy before our talk that you're going to see in a few minutes. And I think we both thought that we would be scrounging for things to talk about after the holidays, after the break, 3-week stretch, right? And we couldn't be more wrong. So we actually have a lot of really important things to talk with you about today. Also, I've got an interview that I did for our television show, CCFR Radio on the Air, with the Minister for Natural Resources and Energy Development of New Brunswick, Mike Holland, great guy, avid hunter, also the co-founder of the Wild Turkey Federation. As well. So I'm going to have an interview with him that we did for TV. I'm going to play that for you in a few minutes. But anyway, before we get started, I'd like to talk about some of the companies that help the CCFR keep going and do the things that we do, and also the CCFR Radio Podcast. A big thank you to our friends over at the Saskatchewan Rivers chapter of Safari Club International. They do a lot of great work over there, including supporting the CCFR. So make sure you check them out at saskriversSCI.com. That's saskriversSCI.com. And if you're in the market for firearms, ammunition, cold weather gear, maybe even airsoft, you name it, you will find it all through our friends at North Pro Sports. So make sure you check them out at northprosports.com. That's northprosports.com. And of course, Vortex, the force of optics. We'd like to thank our friends over at Vortex Canada for continuing to support the podcast and providing great products. You can check all that out at vortexcanada.net. That's vortexcanada.net. And to our friends over at CTOMS. CTOMS Academy provides life-saving training in trauma care and human performance, perfect for outdoor enthusiasts, for hunters, for shooters. You can check them out at ctomsinc.com. That's ctomsinc.com. All right, we're back. So I've got two things I need to go over with you before I play the interview that I did with Mike Holland, and then before we bring Tracy Wilson on. And the first thing is our Scrap C21 project. I mentioned that before the holidays, that we would release all the details on that project, or whatever, 95% of them, on January the 26th. So that's here on YouTube, Rumble, and Facebook. And then for our television audience, the television show lags the podcast by 1 week. So all our television viewers will see that in the first week of February, depending on when they catch the show. It's on, I think, 4 times a week or something for 2 weeks, the same episode. So anyway, that's all going really well. The staff of the CCFR are all working really hard. I'm working hard to get all this done on time. Most of it will be done on time. The time-sensitive things will be. And we even have some subcontractors working to help us get it done. So I'm really looking forward to telling you what exactly it is that we're doing. And I know that that will probably be a bit of a boring episode for some of you because, as you know, I always want to tell you exactly what it is we're doing and why we're doing it, because I feel that that's my obligation in return for all of you putting your trust in us, that we are working hard on your behalf and that we're doing every single thing that is humanly possible to fight the government of a G7 nation that wants to take your guns away. Okay, huge task. We only have so much that we can do in our current role, right, which is the role of spoiler, making it stressful and difficult and consequential for them to take every single step towards confiscation or whatever, making it arduous. Right? That's our role, because we can't stop a sitting government, but we can sure make it difficult for them every step of the way. So that's the role we're playing now. I'm hoping that Canadians are waking up to this horrific, absolutely disastrous government, and then we can switch to the other role that we will play, which is to support the government and support all of their efforts in public safety, if nothing else, to benefit ourselves as gun owners by showing all of the Canadians out there that don't own guns, like, hey, look at how public safety is improving, even though we're getting our guns back, right? So now you know the whole time it was all about politics and power. Okay, it wasn't about public safety. So we'll be playing an active role in that when that time comes. Hopefully it comes soon. So anyway, but yeah, explaining to you guys exactly what we're doing and how we're doing it and why we're doing it is always really, really important to me, because I don't want anyone supporting us based on faith. I want you to support us based on the work that you see us doing and the value that that work has, depending on, you know, where we are in the political cycle, right? So anyway, we'll be releasing all that information in the next episode. The next thing I want to show you is in the TV show. I just finished filming the next show, right, which will air in a week on Wild TV. And I played this clip, and this clip is just interesting, so I want to share it with you. Now, you've seen this interview before, pieces of this interview before. This is Marco Mendicino on Power and Politics with, I don't know, the host is sitting in for Vashi Capellos, I think her name is. But anyway, this host is actually doing his job. He's pressing Marco Mendicino a little bit, and it seems like he knows a little bit about the topic. So anyway, I'm just going to play it, and we'll talk about it after. Check it out.
So let's go with this one, the SKS that Evan was talking about off the top of the show. Very popular hunting rifle, well used throughout the country. Yes, it was a military weapon in 1945. I mean, that's 70 years ago. So that's not in the same category or capacity as an AR-15 would be today. Under this as written, a lot of hunting advocates say the SKS is going to be banned by this. I mean, what do you say to those concerns about that particular popular, primarily hunting rifle?
Well, you said it yourself. This was a gun that was designed for a battlefield. It was designed to ensure that the greatest amount of lethal force could be exercised in the shortest period of time.
Any gun can be used in a crime, right? Regardless of its, the various specifications, all this. And the SKS, yes, it was built for a battlefield, but a battlefield of 75, 80 years ago. I mean, how far back do you go? I mean, the Enfield was the most popular rifle for the Allies in the First World War. I mean, but that's a century ago. So, I mean, how far back do you go on this? It has evolved in its purpose to be a hunting rifle as opposed to a battlefield weapon. It's not used by the military anymore. So are you being overly broad and going after a rifle such as this, which is used overwhelmingly for hunting in this country?
Look, it cannot be disputed that the original purpose for this gun was to be used during a wartime, not to be used in a community.
But in 1945.
But still, that was the original purpose, and we can agree to that. That is a fact.
Okay, so this conversation is around the SKS, okay? And of course it's edited. So I showed you a little flash in the middle to show that it was edited. So this wasn't the entire conversation all at once. I think that whole conversation was somewhere around 11 or 12 minutes. But basically it's Marco Mendicino telling the host that the justification that he needs to ban the SKS is the fact that it has a military lineage, that it was designed for a military purpose. And the host is doing what he was supposed to do, which was to push back to say, well, and come up with an example, which he did, which was the Lee Enfield rifle. So the Lee Enfield rifle is a rifle of military lineage that's probably used by probably 1 million, owned or used by 1 million people for hunting in Canada, okay? Probably 1 million. Lots of Indigenous hunters use Lee Enfields because they're affordable, they're reliable, and it's a bolt-action rifle that you can pick up pretty much anywhere. So the host presses him, well, what about the Lee Enfield? And Marco Mendicino doesn't say anything to the contrary. He doesn't defend the Lee Enfield. He doesn't say, well, that's a bolt-action rifle that probably 1 million people own in Canada, and it's bolt-action. It's completely appropriate for hunting, even though it has a military heritage. So that one's not going to be unless he doesn't do that. He just continues to talk about the SKS. Well, was it or wasn't it not a military rifle? We can agree on that. That's a fact. So I find that really interesting because are they going to ban the Lee Enfield? Are they going to call that a variant of every other bolt action that they stuck in Amendment G46? Again, by the way, if you want to see that amendment, you can go to firearmrights.ca or ccfr.ca, go to the website, and we have the whole list there in case you missed that, right? Just scroll down on the main page and you'll see here's the list of banned firearms. But isn't that interesting how he didn't defend it? And how he basically dug his heels and said, you know what, if it comes from military lineage, that's all the justification we need to ban it. And then, you know, and I'll go just a step further if you want to just hang out with me for one more minute. It's interesting because then they go through all of this trouble by saying, well, there's all these other firearms on the market that you can replace these military firearms with. And it's like, well, there are other bolt actions. Like, what do you mean? Like, I can't have a Lee Enfield, or I can't have, well, a Mauser, right? The 1908 Brazilian Mauser, plus in that amendment, it also says Mauser Sporter, right? All the sporterized Mausers, guns that are made from Mauser actions, like the Parker Hale rifles, like a whole bunch of them. You can't own those, but you can have a Remington 700. That's okay. That's representing, like, I think sometimes we kind of forget how ridiculous and absurd, how, clown, bizarro world this whole conversation is. You can't have these bolt action rifles, but you can have some other ones of a different name that are functionally equivalent. Just play our game, because you might be able to buy these for now. You never know. These could come, we're one shooting with a bolt action away from losing bolt actions, right? So anyway, I just thought it was quite interesting how this would have been a really great opportunity for him to say, oh, Lee Enfield? No, we don't want to piss off all the Lee Enfield owners out there, around 1 million of them probably. No, they could care less. Anyway, I just thought it was interesting. So I just want to show you that clip. We talked about Bill C-21, that project as well. And so right now I'm going to play the interview with Mike Holland. So check this out. All right, we're back. So via, not Skype this time, but via Zoom, we've got Mike Holland, who is the Minister of Natural Resources and Energy Development in the province of New Brunswick. He's also the co-founder of the Canadian Wild Turkey Federation, the bird, not the whiskey, among other projects. So welcome, Mike.
Welcome. Thank you, Rod. I appreciate the invitation to being here and the work that you guys do at CCFR.
Well, thanks for being on. Okay, so we don't have a lot of time in this format, as most of our viewers know, so let's get right into it. So the province of New Brunswick basically is participating in this pushback that we've seen from other provinces and one territory as well, a pushback towards the feds on the gun ban via not allocating resources and whatnot, the provincial resources, to the buyback. So I guess kind of that's the protest vote against the gun ban by not providing those resources. So maybe give us a little bit of detail on how it went down in New Brunswick, if you don't mind.
Well, prior to C-21 and the statement about using provincial resources, Bill C-71 had significant flaws in it. As a government, we had recognized those. I'd spoke out about that a couple of years ago. And now, with the bans that are taking place through C-21, that would be downloaded on the province to allocate resources, which are already stretched very thin within our Department of Public Safety. So upon reviewing the fact that we are stretched thin with these resources already, and this is going to require us to basically do the bidding of the federal government on legislation that we feel misses the mark, because C-71 or C-21 does very little to accomplish the goal of eliminating gun crime or gun violence. So as we talked and came together as a government, our Department of Public Safety came forward and said that we too, in addition to other jurisdictions, won't dedicate resources to applying the work of the gun ban.
Well, certainly there's a lot of gun owners that appreciate that, because I'm not sure that you'd find many gun owners that agree with all this, although some people have different opinions. I think a question that I'd like to ask is, you're operating within a government, a political body basically that has made up the government of a province. How do you get consensus with other actual provincial politicians, I guess? How do you get consensus to create a statement like this and push back against the feds?
Well, like I said, when C-71 came out, I became a vocal member of our cabinet and our government. And although I'm not the Minister of Public Safety, I knew the ramifications it would have to the legal, responsible firearms community. So I stepped in and started speaking about it. At that point, I was able to really be the spokesperson. I was in the media a couple of years ago with it. So that conversation started back then, and every iteration of 71, 21, or whatever we'll see come next, I was able to bring that information together. We have a rather cohesive cabinet. The subject matter expertise that I have in that field was respected. The conversation continued past me, and there were many amenable ministers to have a look and basically look at the legislation. Never mind firearms being the subject of it, but if legislation doesn't accomplish the goal, it's not good legislation. So through that series of conversations, the education I brought to the table and the review of the legislation itself, we felt like at the end of the day, we certainly could do better. And what we have presented in front of us is not going to accomplish the goal. And therefore, do we want to take resources that we already are pressed on and apply to it? So at that point, we all got up from the table and said, yeah, we feel like we're in one accord as we move in this direction.
Yeah, well, an interesting thing that actually happened that's turning out to be a benefit is the Liberals, in my opinion, and I think in the opinion of a lot of people, have overstepped. They went too far because they try to divide us as a community. First, it's the sport shooters and the collectors. They're the first to get their turn to have their things taken. And then eventually the hunters will get their turn. But usually I think governments are a little bit more careful than the Liberals have been. And they bid a little bit too much off too quick. And now there's a pile of hunting rifles and shotguns being banned. What do you say to the average hunter out there who says, well, it's not going to be a problem for me because I only have a bolt action rifle, I guess is the question.
Well, we said that when C71 came out and the discussion was only around assault style weapons, AR-15s or whatever. And I had conversations with a lot of people that said, well, it doesn't really affect me. And I said, well, that's the front end of a very dangerous practice that we could see leak into a variety of different areas. Sure enough, we have. I mean, the handgun ban, for example, essentially shut down that entire industry of legal, responsible shooters in Canada, and quite frankly, had zero effect on the stated goal of limiting and gun crime and gun violence. And so, where does it end? Now we see the hunting firearms, shotguns, some semi-automatics. I mean, I have weapons that I'm unsure about the future of because they're on that list. And you know what? They're generational. It's not something I just went up and bought. It was something that's been in my family. So it needs to be of significant concern to us. And as evidenced by other parties in the NDP and in the Liberals themselves, saying, whoa, hold on. Maybe this needs to be recalculated and we need to correct the drift here. I'm hopeful that overstep was exactly what was needed to show that this is a progressive process that won't end until firearms that are used in a commonplace everyday situation by First Nations farmers and hunters are at risk. And that's just really not something that I can stand in approval of.
Yeah, well, hopefully everyone's got the message now and everyone's awake. But we're out of time, Mike. I really appreciate you coming on, and I guess good luck to us all.
Good luck to us all, and continue the hard work. I really appreciate you guys. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you, Mike. All right, via Skype, we've got Tracy Wilson of the CCFR on the line. Wilson!
Bam, there it is.
Bam.
Bam.
All right, funny thing is over the holidays, we thought we would be scrounging for things to talk about on the podcast and on the TV show too, because, the Parliament isn't sitting and things kind of wind down, for a while over the holidays. But nope. These people are always conniving behind the scenes. Maybe it's what they like to do over the holidays is figure out how to take things that don't belong to them and get in even more into the lives of people that don't want them in their lives. But nonetheless, Blacklock's reporter, doing the usual good work that they do, reported, as it were, that they had filed an ATIP and for a bunch of different things, and they ended up getting information back. But inside that information was some information about the Liberal government's assault-style firearm buyback. What's going on with that?
Yeah. So this was a great ATIP they filed with Public Services and Procurement Canada, where they were looking for, data on stuff the government is looking to spend money on and sign contracts about. And of course, buried within that ATIP on page 22 was a couple of pages about the buyback. And of course, it outlines their failure to be able to engage anybody from the gun industry or from the private sector in trying to facilitate this program. They've identified 7 elements that they need to carry it out, such as a couple examples: storage, collection and transport of firearms, and of course, destruction. They detailed that the RCMP will begin collection of the ASFs. They've even coined a term here in this document. So assault-style firearms, they're calling them ASFs. And that Prince Edward Island will be the easy target for phase 1 of the program, which of course they're going to use trial and error to figure out how to do this across the country on a national level for phase 2. Now, it does say here that this was to begin in December of 2022, bringing Christmas cheer to gun owners everywhere. However, they are late on that program. But it seems like they're still flailing around, but they've sort of decided at this point, since nobody's going to touch it, that, maybe the RCMP will be forced to do it at a national level. And they still have no clue what to do with this. It would take years to even implement something of this standing. So, yeah, I guess we'll have to see what happens. But they're in an office somewhere in Parliament Hill. There are people working right now trying to figure out how to take your stuff. Yeah.
Well, what's obviously the government is desperate.
Yes.
They didn't, when you got somebody as incompetent and as horrible as Bill Blair in charge, because that's who was in charge back when they did this on the file. He wouldn't have given this a second thought. He would have said, well, we're just going to order the RCMP to do this, and we'll worry about the details later. Well, people forget that these tasks are carried out by human beings. A lot of these people are gun owners. A lot of these people didn't get into policing because they wanted to, boot doors down and confiscate property that the government just decides someday is too dangerous to own. And, if they force the RCMP, because I think at some level they can force some members of the RCMP. Anyway, if they say, well, you know what, we're going to give you a bunch of money, we're going to get some, we're going to appoint some special constables, whatever. You need to get this done, period. It's not a discussion. Can you imagine? Like the RCMP are very demoralized as it is. They don't have enough people to do policing. They're a lot of corruption, obviously. They're almost in collapse at some level, right? If you think of all the stuff that Brenda Lucki was involved in. Can you imagine how many my back's out. I got to go on disability. It's time that I actually transition out of policing because this is not what I signed up for. Just on and on. You could have RCMP members be like, you know what? I'm doing everything I can to disrupt this program. But
I would expect that. Yeah.
But I'll say this, and this is going to be a little bit edgy, is there will be 30, 40, maybe up to 50% of those guys that'll be like, I can't wait to start this program. I can't wait for it. Because I've met some of those people, right? I used to work with police a lot. You got mostly people that are like, okay, well, we have to stay reasonable because we get consent from the public. And then you have some people that's like, hey, I can legally do whatever I want. So that's going to create a lot of tension within the RCMP. And I would like police forces, like even any kind of force, a capacity for force has to be dealt with very judiciously and very carefully, especially because you want human beings to carry these things out. And I don't know, that's not something I would ever want to be involved with if I was in government, is trying to figure out how to make that happen and deal with the internal tension. Forget the public, right? Forget the public and how they're going to feel about it. Just within the RCMP. But anyway, I don't know.
Well, and they're short-staffed as it is, just like every other industry, including, the Army. They're all short-staffed. They don't have spare officers to run around kicking in doors to gather up AR-15s from licensed owners. So I don't know. The minister has created quite the mess for himself, and I'm in no hurry to see this be implemented to begin with, but I think he's still a very, very long way off. I could see this being a yet another election promise down the road.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's pretty wild, and not to beat it to death, but I'll tell you, tackling crime is a last resort to these people. They think taking guns away from licensed gun owners using these mechanisms that we just talked about is the easier path.
Yeah.
Right? And then, of course, you're like, okay, well, no idiot would ever think that. And of course, the next question comes up, why are they in such a hurry to take guns away from people that are vetted every day? And they're in no hurry to stop people that have firearm prohibitions from running around on bail after 24 hours shooting people.
Right.
So there's questions. What's the hurry with me and you?
Yeah.
Anyway, whatever. We're not going to get into it, but I think when you have obvious questions, they're worth a little bit of thought. All right, let's move on. So Tyler Shandro, the Minister of Justice. It's Justice, right?
They aren't starting in Alberta.
Yeah. Who's going to be the least trouble and is geographically small? And I don't know what kind of wasn't there some language in there, or did you cover it?
That's in they put that in Minister Shandro's statement. So we're going to cover that.
All right, let's do it.
So Tyler Shandro, once again, Minister of Justice and Attorney General for Alberta, comes out swinging against Mendicino again. I don't know. I can praise this guy enough. God bless Alberta. But yeah, so he's got a statement out. It's fairly short. I'll read it to you here. He says, last week, Minister Mendicino admitted that the federal government has still not figured out how to implement their firearms confiscation program. This admission comes shortly after the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police called on the federal government to not use police services to confiscate guns. Now, media reports have drawn attention to a federal government memo that outlines Minister Mendicino's plans to confiscate firearms across Canada. The memo admits that the efforts to find private sector companies to implement the program failed this summer. With no private sector companies willing to participate, the memo outlines how the RCMP will first be deployed to target Prince Edward Island, which is deemed to be an easy, low-risk target. The federal government is treating PEI as a pilot that will help them learn on the job as they implement their confiscation plan through trial and error. This program is expected to cost $1 billion or more and has supposedly been in the works for 3 years. Then a direct statement from the minister. Despite a mountain of money and years' worth of lead time, Ottawa appears to be lost, especially given their latest attack on hunting rifles and shotguns at minimum. They should proactively extend the amnesty that is currently scheduled to end in October of 2023. Such a decision, however, would involve showing Canadian firearm owners a measure of decency, something that Minister Mendicino and this federal government is seemingly incapable of.
Wow.
There it is.
Shots fired.
Oh boy, right across the bow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A low risk jurisdiction.
Easy, low risk target. Yeah.
Anyway, I think that was in the ATIP, right?
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. They've identified it as a low
risk.
Yeah.
Anyway, we better move on.
I say they start with Alberta. Like, give it a try.
Exactly.
Marco.
Yeah. Anyways. All right, let's move on. That's well, thank you to everyone in the Alberta government for standing up for people, like individual people, right? Yeah. Not your political platform or your ideology or whatever, just for people that just want to be left alone, you know? And as I think of constantly, it's like, what part of get out of my life don't you understand? But these guys, they just don't want to ever do that. They're just like, nope, here's what we're going to do. Anyway, all right, next thing, for a little bit of fun. So in the last podcast, we did this video. We put this video up of Goody Hutchins.
Goody Hutchins, yes.
Yeah. Anyway, if that wasn't embarrassing enough, I went to CPAC and I got all of the actual footage, and I watched this whole thing. And I don't never heard of her before this, right? But wow, like perfect politician, doesn't have a clue about anything, but is extremely confident in her knowledge. So the first clip is super funny. She decides she's had enough of these reporters' questions, and now she's going to rely on her expertise and show everyone how much more experienced and what an expert she is compared to them. Anyway, check this out.
Sorry, Mr. Hutchins.
Any of you here firearms owners? Do any of you here have an FAC, a firearm acquisition certificate? So here's a fact you need to know.
Oh yeah, well, there you go.
Has she been in a time capsule for decades?
Yeah.
Like, I just need to know that. 28
years since they rolled out the PAL system. And not only does she say FAC, because a lot of people make that mistake, right? Because a lot of the guns, like I never had an FAC, so I don't make that mistake often. But a lot of the older guys, right, they call it an FAC because they had them.
But it's been 28 years.
Yeah, it's like 30 years ago, man. 30 years. You're a government official, apparently the expert. She puffs her chest up and goes, does anyone here have a firearms license, an FAC? And then has to explain what that acronym is, like she knows anything. It's just amazing to me. Just what?
Yeah,
it's a con. Like these people are literally grifters conning you. It's a confidence game, and she's looking at everybody like if. I'm not going to play it again, but like she's looking at all these reporters like, you haven't got a clue. Let me teach you something. Come hither.
Yeah, let me show you.
Oh.
And you know what? Here's the thing. She actually should know better because she's a longtime MP. She used to either own or manage an outfitting business. She was vice chair of the Parliamentary Outdoor Caucus, which is an all-party caucus that looks at outdoor issues like hunting, trapping, fishing. Like she should actually know this stuff. And that's probably why they trotted her out to speak about it. She's a woman and she's supposed to know her stuff. And then they trot her out and she makes a complete fool of herself and them. Like, I'm embarrassed for her.
Well, look at all the gaffes all in one single appearance. Yeah. Like it was gaff central. And in fact, if you know what, I'm gonna play this video over while we're talking. But as she utters FAC and starts talking about the acronym, look at Marco Mendicino's face. Like, look at his face. His eyes flutter a little. He's God. Like, oh man. And how many times did he do that throughout her whole appearance? And then at the end, if you remember in the last podcast, I'm like, I made that little meme out of it. She's like, I nailed it. Come on, Marco. Now that you know how it's done, let's go for dinner on the taxpayer.
His face reminds me of, in the cartoons when we were a kid and you'd have the big hook that came out and pulled somebody off the stage, like that's exactly what it reminded me of. He's just like, oh no.
Yeah. He's like, I make enough. Yeah. I blow myself up enough. I don't need you to do it. But anyway, these are the Liberal Party of Canada, ladies and gentlemen. All right. So one more clip. So this is not only does Goody Hutchins know all about the licensing system and has to teach it to everyone else, right? Talk about spreading misinformation, right? Hey, there's some misinformation right there. Anyway, more misinformation coming up because she's now also an expert in firearms manufacturing and the firearms manufacturing industry. Check this out.
We've reached out. I've had discussions, and so has Minister Mancino. There are many gun manufacturers out there, and we all know in the world of economies, if there's a need, I'm sure you'll see some gun manufacturers step up with another firearm that is available at a cheaper price. So all those discussions are ongoing, and if there's a need, I'm sure you will see some gun manufacturers step up.
Okay, so really short clip, and that's just after that is when she said the whole 22 gauge. I shoot bears and moose with 22 gauge rifle, or whatever it was. And you know what? I'm okay when people misspeak because I do it all the time, right? Like, oh, I got mixed up or whatever, because everybody's human. But just so ridiculous. Like she's an expert, and she's like, okay, well, don't worry. If there's, I know the industry, the firearms manufacturing industry, and if there's a need, they'll make a Canadian compliant firearm for us. Don't worry, the manufacturers will step up. And it's like, wait a minute. There's like 2 firearm manufacturers, small businesses in Canada, like 2 of them, I think. And that's it. And I think they tried all that stuff, right? So
when they did the first ban in May of 2020, that's what they said. Well, you can't have these AR-15s and you can't have these other guns. So, we're going to do some sort of confiscation program and you'll have to get something else. This literally happened to you. Then you go out and get something else. And in the meantime, they ban that too. And then here we are with the late stage amendment to C-21, which pretty much bans everything else. So there are companies that did go out and say, okay, we're going to have to change some, modify the way we were doing these firearms. We've got to comply with the new law and the new regulation. And they call it circumventing. In fact, the anti-gun lobbies have been doing that too, saying that these are, it's loopholes and these gun manufacturers are circumventing the law. No, they're complying with it. Like, to say that is even ridiculous. So it's talk about moving the goalposts. Like, I don't know. I don't know what they want from us.
Oh yeah, they want everything, and they want to gaslight everyone else into going along with it. And it's so funny because if you, as a firearm owner, if you're an avid firearm owner, right, like I was for many years, well, I still am, right, but I just haven't had time to shoot guns. But back in the old Civil Advantage YouTube channel days, right, like I would buy a lot of stuff. And I mean, there was almost no Canadian manufacturers, like 2 or 3, making magazines for AR-15s. And they're not even like your regular Magpul style, right? They were kind of niche little things, small runs, one-offs, basically, right? And I mean, the firearm manufacturing industry doesn't want anything to do with Canada. Our market is too small, as it was before the big gun ban.
Before all these bans, now
before us
for
to
sure
even
won't.
get stuff. Now they're like, why would we ever make a single thing for Canada? They're lunatics over there. They're just going to change the rules. Why would I invest money? You know, I think about Crusader Arms.
Yeah.
You know, like they just came out with a line of new rifles, all compliant with what these lunatics wanted. And just no sooner, like 1 year after they finally get that stuff, and the development cycle for a firearm, like a semi-auto like that, is extremely, it's extremely expensive and takes a tremendous amount of effort and money and commitment and risk. And then you get to sell their stuff for what, a year? And then we're going to ban that anyway because you're circumventing and then I'm sure you'll step up and make something else. Like there won't be a single new firearm coming into Canada other than maybe a lever action, right?
That's
Lever
probably
action's
the way
getting
they want
popular.
it.
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
of course.
I don't think it's a side effect. I think it's an intended consequence.
So riddle me this, and I know we're going on and on about it, but it just represents the Liberals so well. And it's like you know what you could have done? You could have said, we know it's been a rough ride. We've had to ban these guns for good reasons. Here's all our evidence. And you know what? I'm sorry, manufacturers. It's just something that needs to be done. And you know, it's just it is the way it is. Hopefully some companies have some products out there that we can still bring into Canada. Like, just be honest. But instead she's like, oh, don't worry. They're going to, not only are they going to step up and build new stuff for you, but it'll be cheaper because there'll be demand. It's like she's talking to 5-year-olds, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, they don't know anything. I'll just spew some BS and they'll just buy it. It's just incredible, really. Let's talk about something really great, which is our Field Officer of the Month.
Yeah, this is really great, and she's really great. So I'm happy to announce that Field Officer of the Month for this month is Sophie Bélan from Quebec. So Sophie is great. Quebec's always been sort of an area that's difficult to break into. I know you and I don't speak French, so that's a little bit of a barrier. And so we've always relied really heavily on our volunteers to carry the torch out there. And Sophie's come into the CCFR. She's got all kinds of energy. She's just networking and making connections with other advocates in Quebec and going around to businesses and clubs. I drove from a wedding just this fall out to Montreal to go to an event that she was at, and she's just all over the place and doing an awesome job. And I wish I could, I think I have a lot of energy. I wish I could bottle hers because she's just bubbly, awesome, and just totally into it. So I'm really proud to work with Sophie in Quebec, and I'm happy to see where the future goes there. She will receive a $100 gift certificate to the CCFR store so she can choose some cool new CCFR gear. And of course, she'll be recognized here on the podcast and on our TV show that airs on Wild TV. So yeah, very exciting. I love you, Sophie, and thank you for everything you do.
That's awesome. Thank you, Sophie, for your work. Really appreciate it.
Yes.
Okay. So last thing, I just want to make mention. I did an interview with Mike Smith on CKNW in Vancouver. CKNW is the talk radio station in Vancouver. It's airs downtown, and not exactly a redneck area. And Mike is very fair. It's funny because we always want fair treatment. We don't need the treatment that anti-gunners get on mainstream media. We just want it to be fair, where you're talking about both sides and you're actually holding people to account if they lie. That's what journalists are supposed to do, and they almost never do it. But Mike Smith has me on, and he's just fair. He's fast, super fast, but he's fair. And, I remember one day, this was 2 years ago, he said, would you mind hanging out and taking calls? I'm like, of course I'll take calls, and I want the anti-gunners. I want someone to be throwing points at me. It was like, you know what? That's a good point. Let me think about that. Like I'm looking for that real pushback, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I can't be right about everything for sure. So, and I want to know if I'm wrong, because then I'll change my opinion. It's got to be true. So anyway, I've been taking calls with him. He's actually got to the point where, because the anti-gunners will not take calls.
Oh, no, of course
they will not appear with anyone. They will not debate anyone. They will not take calls. And you got to know that that's for a reason. It's not for no reason. So anyway, whereas I'm like, oh, bring anybody, anyone in the country that's competent, and we'll have a discussion. So anyway, he doesn't even ask me anymore. He just goes to callers. And it's funny. There was 2 people. I've never ever had an anti-gunner call ever. Of all the time I've been on a show, it's always like gun owners, and they're agreeing and they're angry and all the rest of that stuff. And police too. They're like, yeah, it's ridiculous. I don't know why we're messing around with gun bans. And finally there was 2 people, and they were like mildly like, I don't know why anyone needs an AR-15 basically, but we shouldn't be taking people's guns when the criminals, we know exactly where they are. Right. I just want to mention it's that interview. If you want to listen to it, is on the YouTube channel. Again, Mike Smith with CKNW, a real journalist, actually, Smith, SMYTH. And I just thought I'd mention it. Anyway, where are the anti-gunners, the real ones?
Well, and that's the thing. I got to say, I won't go on too long either. But I've noticed even on social media, where Twitter is a total leftist toilet, right? Everybody's on there and they're just scrapping with me and going at me. And that's okay. That's what it's for, right? But I've noticed even people who have for years trolled me or, argued with me about guns back and forth. And even they're like, you know what? This whole thing is stupid. These gun bans are stupid. The fact that we're not focused on reducing actual crime, violence, or gun smuggling, like they are totally losing their energy on this. Absolutely. So where are the real anti-gunners? Not the lobbyists, but the real anti-gunners.
Yeah, there's very few of them.
Yeah,
there really are. And it's funny. You go to the docs against firearm ownership. You go to their Twitter feed and they turn off replies on everything.
Oh, yeah, of course. They've already blocked everybody. And now they just turn off replies because they just want to say what they want to say to each other so they can pat each other on the back and, not have to think critically or have any sort of debate or challenge.
Where are all their people? And I mean, you look at their national days of action. Like nobody shows up. Like
12 views. Yeah. Like nobody's listening to them. Except the government.
Except the government, right? Because they have their own agenda and they're like, here's that. And I'm going to say it. Here's the useful idiots. They want
100%.
Yeah, they want to be on TV. They just, they got to feed the ego. Just get them on TV. Get the prime minister down there telling them how much they. And they'll do anything. They'll stand on their head.
Of course they will. They'll
do a backflip if you ask them. But any critical conversation, nope, they won't take part in it. It's just ridiculous. Nope. All right. Anyway, kind of interesting. Okay, we've been on it a bit at it about 25 minutes here, something like that. So thanks for the update. And as I said, and I'll say it one more time in the outro, and I said it in the intro, January 26th, that's when our big plan comes out. I know Wilson's been working very hard and not so quietly behind the scenes. And
there's nothing quiet about the way I work.
There's very little behind the scenes here. But the big project's coming out, and I look forward to us having this conversation again in the next podcast when we release our big Scrap C21 project. Thanks for the update.
Awesome. We'll see you then.
All right, that's going to do it for episode 134 of the CCFR Radio Podcast. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Don't forget to share this with your friends. Tell them to watch it. Really good information. This was kind of we saw some funny stuff in this episode, which is always great. And you know what? You can also ask your gun club to share this episode on their email blast or on their social media accounts. And especially the next episode when we unveil our Scrap Bill C21 project. So that's really important, and it's important that we get everyone we possibly can in the firearms community to participate in these initiatives, because there's strength in numbers. When the government just gets buried in mail, when the government gets 1,000 phone calls, when the government gets countless emails, when the government sees all of these things happening and all the people participating and people angry at what they're doing, that's what changes their mind. That's what pushes back against them, especially when they're locked into this, plan to dominate everybody, take their things and whatever, right? Just impress their will upon everybody. This is when that is the pushback that we need. So anyway, spread this information around. Again, thanks so much for all your support. I really, really appreciate it. Take care, and we will see you in 2 weeks.
This is another episode of the CCFR Radio Podcast. Remember, if you don't stand up for your own ability to own and use firearms, who will? Join the CCFR or donate right now at www.firearmrights.ca.